The whole time we're just like, hi.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Hey everyone, welcome. This is Not Your Mother's Sex Ed, where we talk about everything sex and sex related for almost all ages. I'm Michelle. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Kristen, also she, her. How you doing today, friend?
I am doing well. I'm actually on a new medication. For everything, I just started taking Prozac. Figure we could talk about that to help normalize it.
Heck yes. How are you liking it? Are you having any side effects?
I've had every side effect under the sun. Every single side effect. They've been short-lived for the most part. So that's cool. They've kind of like came and resolved. But I guess it's not quite a new medication. I just upped the dose.
Okay. That changes it. It's almost like being on a new medication.
Yes. And my, like the heartburn, which I associate with anxiety. And I also take thyroid medication. I know you know that, Kristen. But Prozac can affect your thyroid function.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I'm working with my doctor. We're going to figure it out. We did blood tests too to check my thyroid levels. But my heartburn is out of control.
You just eating through the Rolaids in the tongue.
Yeah. Woo. How are you? How are you doing?
Good. I'm on the same medication. If we're throwing it out there to normalize it, I don't take Prozac, but I do take paroxetine, which is the generic brand of something. I'm gonna remember halfway through. So if I just randomly throw out, yeah. Do you take yours for anxiety? Do you take it for depression? Do you take it for a combo?
Oh, good Lord.
All the things.
We're taking it for what seems like everything under the sun. We're working towards finding a good diagnosis. My doctor is trying to determine, I guess I want to say the source of the anxiety. We started out trying to treat ADHD and that didn't work. She thinks there might be bipolar in there. And so that can really affect, manic episodes. And then, your thyroid can also have, it can cycle. So you can have manic and depressive episodes there too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things working together. We're trying to figure out what's going to work best. I'm pretty in the new phases of trying medication. So
yeah, it's a tough phase to be in. I went through something very similar where we just spent a lot of years trying to figure out exactly what was wrong with me, because I was having just spontaneous panic attacks that were extreme enough that one of the first things they checked me for was like a heart condition. Like they thought that my heart, like I had heart failure, because I truly thought that I was dying. And I wore a heart monitor for like a month, never came back with anything. And so finally the doctor was like, well, I think you just have a panic disorder, so try some yoga. And I was like, great, thank you. Years later, turns out I have a very small tumor on my pituitary gland, and it shoots out way too much, stress hormone from time to time. So that's kind of the core factor, but I'm also working on an ADHD diagnosis and managing that. And, it's been a whole thing, but I take paroxetine and the occasional Xanax when the panic gets to be a little too much.
Yeah, and you've done really well dialing back on that, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I think this will just be a whole episode in and of itself, but normalizing psychological conditions in the medical community. But I had one doctor who was like, oh, just take a Xanax every 4 or 5 hours and you'll be fine. And so I was taking about 4 a day, which I was very young at the time. He never talked to me about it being an addictive substance. He never talked to me about how hard it would be to stop taking. And I finally ended up finding another doctor who was really kind and really reliable and was like, this is too much, you need to stop. And I almost checked myself into a rehab. Like it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So,
but you're on the other side of that. So that's awesome.
I take maybe a half of one every couple of days if needed, and that's it. So So I hope
amazing.
I hope your new meds work out for you.
Yes, me too. We'll see. She didn't really think I was going to have too much issue with side effects upping the dose. So
Just kidding. Surprise.
yeah, surprise. But it'll be okay. It'll be good.
It will be.
We'll get it all figured out, and it's, you know, to be expected that we might have to play around with some stuff before we get it right. So
Yeah. The hard thing is that most of those types of drugs are like build up in your system kind of drugs. And so it's not like you can take it for a day or two, decide if it works. It's like you got to stay on it for weeks to months before you know for sure whether or not it's going to do what you want it to do.
yeah, that's actually why we tried Adderall first, because my biggest concern is that like ADHD brain, like the neurodivergence, the, you know, executive dysfunction, all that stuff is my biggest concern. And she's like, well, you have a few different things that you're screening positive for, so we can do this thing and we will know right away if it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, you will know within like a week to 10 days if the Adderall is going to work. She's like, the other one's going to take several weeks. And I'm an instant gratification person. So I was like, well, let's just find out.
Yeah, then we'll do it.
Yeah. And it was a disaster. But now we know.
Here's my question. What were your thoughts on Adderall? Because like I said, I do struggle a lot with like executive function, following through, like ability to retain memory. Like I'm just the kind of person my whole life where if it is not directly in front of me, I forget that it exists.
Absolutely.
I won't deal with anything until it is an emergency or until somebody's mad at me. And as a kid and as a teenager, like it really, I liked school. So I think that period of time where kids typically get diagnosed with ADHD, I missed that because I was good at school. But to me, school was a competition. So it was kicking out dopamine all the time. Like, I got to be better. I got to be good. It wasn't until I grew up and got a husband and had kids and all of a sudden have these like humdrum everyday things that I have to do where I realized it's not even that I don't want to, it's that I physically cannot. Like my brain just grinds to a halt. And so I started talking to my doctor about it. And he's like, you know, I'm going to be honest. He's like, there's a lot of cases of undiagnosed adult ADHD out there. Oftentimes people with ADHD make great dates because they're fun and adventurous and spontaneous, but they make terrible spouses because they're shit at paying the bills and cleaning the house and doing all. And I'm like, that's me. But I'm worried about trying medication for it because like I've got counseling going and that's been helping me a lot in like recognizing how neurodivergent I am in some ways, like, and recognizing that people with a brain like mine, we chase dopamine. Like we do whatever it is that's going to give us that dopamine kick, and that's just what we do. But I feel like part of me still wants to try a medication just to help, but I'm on so many other different kinds of medication, and I have finally found one that works with my anxiety and my prolactinoma. I'm terrified if I take Adderall or something that it's going to mess that up. And it took me years to get where I am with that.
Yeah, you know, honestly, my biggest concern with any medication that I'm taking, and this stands across the board, this is every single substance, caffeine included. I hate that I'm dependent on caffeine. I don't like to take medication. Yeah, same. I got some here too.
Yeah.
I don't like to depend on anything. And so for me, when I'm talking to my doctor, that's the biggest one is, you know, if it's addictive or not.
Yeah.
And that's something that is common in my family. And so that was a big worry for me. But of all people, you know, I'm very cognizant of that. So the biggest concern was that if I took Adderall, it could push me into a manic episode if I have bipolar disorder.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was the biggest issue about starting it. And but my doctor was like, you're gonna know right away. Like it's not gonna take to be like, oh, am I feeling manic? And so the only symptom that I hated, like side effect that was not having to do with a manic episode, was dry mouth. My mouth was the driest it has ever been. I
Really?
could not drink enough liquids. It was horrible. I, for good or for bad, if anybody's watching who has like heard about some of my other projects, I bought a 1973 Volkswagen van or Volkswagen microbus, excuse me. And
Lulu.
yes, Lulu. I went and saw her and made the decision to buy her when I was finishing my Adderall doses.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
I knew so much about that journey, but that I did not know.
Yes. That was what was going on the back burner. And like, I don't regret my decision at all. And so part of me thinks that there is some of that worked with my ADHD brain that was like, get this thing done.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put it off. Just get it done. And you're going to make a decision. And, so on and so forth.
Right.
But the aftermath, my emotions were dialed up to like 1,000. I actually got into an enormous argument with my mom. I stormed out of the house. That's like not me at all.
Yeah.
So it definitely, like, the like manic episode side of things was really bad. And all of that combined made me wonder how anybody could ever seek out Adderall and then get addicted to it, because it was a nightmare. But I think that aside from that, it would have actually been very helpful.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I wonder if that kind of effect is more because you're still seeking that diagnosis, and maybe the ADHD wasn't the core of it. Maybe there is something, because the doctor said you might have more manic episodes if, you're prone to bipolar or something like that, right?
Yeah. So she was thinking it was that. She was thinking that there's a possibility that it's OCD anxiety, because just OCD is an anxiety condition.
Yeah, it is.
And so I was thinking that my specific brand of anxiety is OCD related.
Interesting.
So that's a possibility. And then we've talked about this. I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast or not, but I do think that I could be autistic.
I did not know that either. Yeah. I don't think we talked about that on the podcast. I remember you mentioning it, but I don't think it was on here.
Yeah. So I think I could be autistic. And more that I see autism, just general everyday life, the more I'm like, oh, hey, that's me. Like, oh my gosh, is that why I do that? And one of those being, it was today, I was watching a Try Guys video. I
love the Try Guys. Shout out to the Try Guys.
Yeah, shout out to them. Love them. And it's actually about the Try Moms, which I also love that they have that going for them. Where one of the women says, I'm autistic, so I can't pick up like certain negative emotions.
Who was it?
I cannot remember her name.
Whose wife, girlfriend?
It was, so she's more of like a behind the scenes mom.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about. Okay, yeah.
She's part of like the photo shoot that they had and some other stuff. But she was saying that she's autistic, and so she couldn't pick up on negative emotions. So oftentimes she doesn't feel fear. And that resonated with me so much.
Really?
For years, I have been wondering why I'm not afraid of things.
Interesting.
And it could be because I'm autistic. Some kind of neuro. Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that a lot of us are fairly neurodivergent, and we're just now getting to a place in society where those abnormalities are becoming more normal. You know?
That we just put to the surface. Yeah.
Well, I wish you all the best on your journey towards diagnosis and medication.
Yes, thank you.
Shall we continue? I think we spent a solid like 40 minutes just bantering. I don't know how much of that'll make it on the final cut, but we are here to make a podcast, darn it. Should we make a podcast?
We should make a podcast.
What are we talking about today?
So today I wanted to talk about sex noises and how weird and wonderful they are.
The weird and wonderful world of sex noises. I will say we should probably preface this episode. I know we say this every time that this is meant for almost all ages. And oftentimes we try really hard to remain relatively scientific. It should be something you can show in a classroom, things like that. I think this one by default is going to be a little bit less aimed towards younger audiences.
Yes.
I mean, we're not going to be crass by any means, but we are strictly talking about intercourse this whole time. So there'll be a little bit of science in there, but a lot of it is just like personal narratives and experiences and normal versus not normal. So we'll just throw that out there at the beginning on the off chance you've got like your kid sitting with you, or just know that will be the content.
Yes, that's always good. That's good to get out there. Thank you.
Right.
Weird and wonderful sex noises. What would you say is the most talked about sex noise?
I would have to say the one I hear most often talked about, and usually in some sort of like humorous or negative connotation, would be the queef.
Yes, the queef. I actually hate how it's represented in media, and I hate how it's talked about.
They made an entire South Park episode dedicated entirely to the queef.
I think I'm pretty sure I've seen that episode.
It's good. In fairness, it is funny.
Yeah.
It's a funny episode, but not once have I ever heard anything positive in regards to queefing.
So when we talk about queefing, what is a queef?
So it's essentially, I've heard it referred to in a number of different ways. A lot of people just assume it's like a vaginal fart or a front fart, which it technically isn't, correct?
That's correct. So a queef, which you're right, is vaginal fart, vaginal gas. I think vaginal flatulence might even have been a word I've come across.
That's not sexy in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, none of those are good. I actually, most of the time, I feel like the actual word for something is the better choice. And this one, I honestly think that queef is probably the better choice.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah. So all it is air that's been introduced into the vagina that then has to be released.
Yeah.
And it has to be released because the vagina is a dead end.
There's no place for it to go.
Yeah, there's no place for it to go except back out.
Yeah.
And so, when we think of like actual like farting, flatulence, actual gas, that's a completely different realm of things.
Well, that's gas that's actually like produced inside the body.
Yeah, it's, the decomposition of our food that we're eating. It's, the bacteria in our gut that's digesting that, and, their byproducts. And that's why like gas, like actual farts, have a smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and queefs don't. They don't smell.
They should smell just like your vagina smells.
Yes, whatever your vagina naturally smells like, which they do have a smell. The smell is completely normal. That's what a queef could smell like if a queef had smell. I'm not going to say that they do or don't, but it's just air that's been trapped.
Yeah, which you have to figure it at risk of using like a crude hand gesture, but when you have a very small opening and then you have any sort of penetration, a lot of the times, even which is physics, there's a pocket of air in front and you're forcing that in. When you pull out, any air that's been forced in there is going to come out, and it's going to come out with some force.
Yeah.
Just
and that's
how it works. Yeah. And it might, in fairness, it does sound just like a fart. But
it does.
Biologically, you have to figure it's both pockets of gas being forced out of soft tissue. Like it's going to sound similar. The difference is in what that gas is actually composed of.
Yeah. And that's actually the same reason why you can make fart sounds with your mouth, is you just make a shape and that you quickly expel air from, and
that's it.
Ta-da, fart sounds.
So one could say then that a queef is more akin to blowing a raspberry with your mouth than it is farting.
I love that. I like
Right?
that. I've actually had arguments with men, and I guess I should use that term loosely because we were younger. I don't even know if we were actually like men and women yet. We could have been boys and girls.
With boys, yeah. With
It's
gentlemen.
Yes. Where they argued with me that queefs smelled like farts.
No, they don't. Unless you have like a true biological medical problem.
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
They shouldn't. Yeah. And I argued till I was blue in the face with these people, and they still reject it. So
my vaginal raspberries do not smell like farts.
I love that so much. Oh my gosh.
I will use that forever on. Oh, I'm sorry, please pardon my vaginal raspberry.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, PSA, they don't smell.
They don't smell
like farts.
Now, again, though, there are certain medical conditions. Most specifically, there's something called a fistula, which is essentially like a hole that forms in the soft tissue between the rectum and the vagina. So there's a wall there, and there's a hole that can form. And oftentimes when you get that, then fluids, gases, etc., from each area can cross over into the other. But again, that's not, we're normalizing things like queefing, but that isn't a normal thing. And then it is something that can and should be medically treated. There's a lot of negative things that can come from that as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something that requires medical treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Queefing in and of itself does not.
No, here's the question. Have you ever?
So I will say, before I get into this, queefs can be caused by anything entering, any gas entering the vagina. So like any air, and a variety of different positions. So different like sexual positions, or, certain stretches, even yoga, like depending on what you're doing with your body, air can become trapped there. So I want to say that the time I've ever actually, and I totally have ever actually queefed was the result of like contorting my body into weird positions, like a stretch, or being like, yeah, I can put my feet behind my head, or like some high schooler thing,
Yep.
I think that's the only time I've ever encountered that specific sound.
No, that's fair. I distinctly remember in middle school, it was like late middle school. I was really good friends with this girl, and I won't say her name because I don't want to embarrass her. Like that's her thing to tell, but she blew all of our minds. She could queef on command. And I remember I have this very clear memory of going over to her house, and it was like me and maybe one or two other girls, and we're all just like sitting in her bedroom, I don't know, looking at magazines or listening to Snow Patrol or something, right? Like, and she just spontaneously mentioned it. We were talking about it, and she's like, oh, I can queef anytime I want to. And we were like, no, you can't. Like, none of us had ever done it at this point in our lives, right? So we're just like, nuh-uh. And God help me, she could. She laid on her bed, she put her feet behind her head, and she could literally suck air in and then blow it out. And she could do it as many times as she wants. So she'd be like, just over and over and over again on command. And I have never once in my life met anybody else who can do that. And I don't know if as an adult it's something that she's proud of or embarrassed about, but to this day, it blows my mind, and I think she should have nothing but pride.
This person is my hero.
I know.
Hero. I know you said this is her story to tell, and I need to hear it.
I know. She was a great person anyway. Like, she and I haven't talked in years, but it just, the fact that that memory stayed in my ADHD brain at all, like, really says a lot. So girl, if you're out there, you know who you are. If you ever want to reach out and be on the podcast, just give us a call. Give us a call.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
Great.
So I actually have a friend. I don't remember the story fully, so I know that I won't tell it right. But I guess this is kind of dumb too. I think I've heard dudes refer to any female farts as queefs. Like,
really?
I think I have, because so if they're watching, and I really, really hope you guys are, if you're watching,
you're who this podcast is directed at, so you can learn something.
And maybe I have the story wrong. All I remember is that I have a friend, and I obviously won't say her name either, who our friend group jokingly called Queen Queef for a hot second. But it was like in a group setting that she queefed. And so I don't know how it came about. Like, that's the part that I'm like lacking in my memory, is how this came about.
Right.
But
doing gymnastics, riding horses, dancing, doing the splits. What happened?
The details are fuzzy, but they did call her Queen Queef for a while. I don't know how much she appreciated that, but
I don't know, but it's kind of a great nickname.
Right?
It's some alliteration. Yeah, I love it. I get it. I have absolutely queefed in both a sexual and like a non-sexual situation. Like you said, it's very easy. If you're ever doing things like yoga, or you're doing something like gymnastics or dance or anything where particularly your legs, if they're, stretching apart, going sideways, like going up behind your head, whatever, sometimes air just gets sucked in. But I found, and at the risk of divulging too much information about my own sex life, I don't ever queef unless we're doing doggy.
Oh.
But doggy in particular really seems to get a lot of air up there. So
yeah, and some positions can do it. How do you, okay, actually, before I ask that question, do you feel embarrassed during sex or sexual activity, just kind of ever?
Yeah, I mean, yes. And do I? The answer is, I think, more have I, yes. Do I currently? Less so, but still occasionally. But again, I'm married and I'm with somebody who I've been with for years now. And so every year that passes, that embarrassment level goes down and down. But there are still situations where, we're trying something new, or I just can't quite get there, or, where you're like, oh, I'm a little embarrassed. But yeah, what about you?
How do you handle those situations?
It depends. So when I was younger, and when I was with partners who, I didn't know incredibly well, intimately or emotionally, I didn't really handle it at all. I just kind of kept it all bottled up inside, but then I would just let that embarrassment like fester and rot, Now with my husband, I'm in a position where like embarrassment will always just turn to laughter, where like I'll laugh because I'm embarrassed. But he also knows that, and so we'll either talk about it or we'll laugh about it together, and then just make it a non-issue. So
I think that that's the absolute best way to handle any kind of like embarrassing things, because even if, like, I'm not going to say that you can't be embarrassed,
right,
during any sexual activity, because it happens and stuff happens, and like just unexpected things can happen, and that can be embarrassing. But I think it's really great to just acknowledge it for what it is.
Yeah.
And enjoy your moment.
Oh, enjoy your moment. Absolutely.
Yeah. So queefing aside, bodies make weird noises just generally.
Oh, just generally,
And,
yeah.
yeah. And probably my like the sound that sticks out in my head the most is the sound of the air that's trapped when two chests are pushed together.
Mm-hmm. Chests and bellies.
Yes, that particular like fart sound, that particular raspberry.
It's a unique one. It is also one that happens all the time, particularly if the bodies are a little sweaty. Like the sweatier that you are as a couple, the more that sound is going to happen. And it's normal. It is perfectly normal if you're out there and it happens and you're embarrassed. My 2 cents, either completely ignore it and just keep going, like don't let it ruin that moment for you, or B, laugh about it and high five each other or something. Like have fun with it. There's no way to avoid it unless you're gonna do it with a sheet between you or something, you know?
Yeah. And that's how I like to deal with like more embarrassing stuff. It's just laugh about it.
Yeah.
So like the first time I ever like heard that sound, I was a teenager, and I thought it was hilarious.
It's because it is.
It's so funny. And it absolutely did not ruin the moment, at least for me. I don't think it ruined the moment for him either. It's hilarious. What other sounds? Give me a sound. What do we got?
Here's one I think that we should throw out there in the sense of normalizing things. I mean, we've talked about the fart sound you get from queefing, you know, the vaginal raspberry. We've talked about fart sounds you get from two sweaty bodies just smashing up against each other. Sometimes during intercourse, normal farts will happen too.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is critical to throw out there, because I have heard stories from so many women who will be like, oh my God, I had sex last night and I farted and I'm humiliated. And it's like, here's the thing. When you're laying there, kneeling there, sitting there, whatever it is that you're doing with your legs spread, stuff is happening down there. Normal biologic functions are still continuing. Like, unless you are 100% focused on holding things in, it is completely normal during intercourse for a little tube to slip out.
Yes.
It is completely normal. And it shouldn't be something that anybody gives you crap about. It shouldn't be anything that you are embarrassed about. Like, that is normal and it is okay.
Definitely okay. Oh my goodness. And let it happen.
Yeah.
Like, just let it happen. Enjoy yourself. If you're in this moment and you're doing these activities, enjoy it, man. Yeah. Don't like, because who wants to be so like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna fart, I gotta hold it in. Like, yeah. That's not for anyone.
Now, in fairness, I will say, like, probably don't try to make your butt trumpet as loud as it can go.
Probably not.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
I will tell an intimate story. My wedding night.
Oh no.
My wedding night. It was a rough day anyway. Okay. I started my period the morning of my wedding. Michelle, you were in my wedding.
I was there. I remember this. That's why the second you said, I was like, oh no.
So my husband's first memory of our wedding day is me waking up, walking to the bathroom and screaming at the top of my voice, fuck! I had to wear a white dress. I had purchased very nice lacy white lingerie for that night. And my body had decided that of all the times, that would be the perfect time to let the crimson flood flow. So already rough start that night. And I will preface by saying, like, at this point, my husband and I had already been intimate. We'd been dating for a year. Like, we're like, okay, time for our post-marital coitus, right? That is like wedding night tradition. You get married and then you have sex. we were going at it pretty excitedly, but we also had eaten a lot that day because it was our wedding. So we'd had cake and they'd sent all of the food up to our room. So we'd just been like binging on wedding food, and I farted right on his testicles, just mid thrust. And the sound it made because of that extra, like, right on his balls. And it wasn't a quiet one. It was like a full on, just ate too much food, way too much pressure on top of me. And he still just kept going. We both laughed and then we kept going. And that is exactly how sex should be. Am I proud of that moment? No. Will I always be a little bit embarrassed? On my wedding night, we had to have sex on a towel because I started my period. And then I farted on his testicles. Not my proudest moment, but it is absolutely a beacon of like, hey, these things are okay. Like they are normal and they're fine. And if you have the right partner who isn't going to shame you or embarrass you, like the night will still end just fine.
That was a beautiful story.
Thank you. One day when I write my autobiography, that'll be a chapter unto itself, I'm sure. So
it should be. And like kudos to you to both eating at your wedding and also like having sex after your wedding, because not many people I think actually make it to that.
We ate nothing at the wedding itself. Honestly, we were too busy like playing host and going around and talking to everybody and taking pictures with people. But the venue that we were at was so sweet, and they kind of specialized in weddings, so clearly they knew this. They're like, we're going to box all of this extra stuff up and we're just going to send it up to your room. And we're like, oh, but we're really tired, we kind of just want to go to sleep. But then when we finally got out of our clothes and we're just like, okay, I'm hungry, let's eat. So yeah, we gorged, and then we're like, maybe we should just go to sleep. And we're like, nah, we should have some fun. So we did, and then we slept and slept and slept and slept. But yep. Yeah, nice period fart right on his balls. It was really, will never be a porn, let me just tell you that.
So I don't think we've talked about this yet on the podcast, the prevalence of pornography in young lives and coming of age, learning sexuality from porn. The first time I encountered a fart during sexual activity of any kind was because my boyfriend showed me a clip of a porn where a woman farts.
Really?
He thought it was hilarious. And like even the woman kind of giggled.
Yeah.
Like, it was whatever. And then she was like, oh. And he was like, oh my gosh, you have to see this. This is so funny.
You know what though? I'm glad that was a porn, because I feel like the reason why we have to do podcasts like this is because when most of your knowledge about, sex and sexuality is coming from pornography, you're not getting the things that people usually think are gross or abnormal, or, like you're getting the perfect version of what real life actually is. So I'm glad that there was just a normal porn out there that wasn't like fart fetish porn, like there's a fetish for everything. And I will put that out there. There's the opposite side of that spectrum too. This is real life. This is where that pornography is. Yes. So good for them for having it out there.
So that was great. That was my first experience with that. I do have what I consider a horrifying story, but it's also involving, I want to say it's not involving me, but I was there, so I guess clearly it was involving me.
Tell me. Story time.
This I don't know how to describe it. The smushy sound, the wet sound.
Yeah, like I refer to it as it sounds a lot like stirring a pot of mac and cheese.
That sound. Yep.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
That one is probably honestly the most common sound, because that's just anytime you have moisture and something, push it into it, it's gonna make a sound.
Yeah.
So my story is that I was a freshman in college in the dorms, and I will preface this saying I'm an extremely awkward human being. I don't know if that's coming across to our viewers or not, but I am.
Yep.
And so I don't always know how to respond in situations, and I tend to freeze when I don't know how to respond in situations. So that's the preface here. So long story short, my drunk roommate brings a guy home.
I can see where this is going.
And the dorm is dark. I'm sitting in bed on my phone. So I'm clearly awake, but it's dark. You can see the shine from my phone. Her bed was lofted and mine was not. So they climbed onto my bed to get onto her bed.
Ah, okay. I thought you were like, they just climbed on there and stayed.
I hope. Oh God, what do I do?
Just laying up against the wall, like,
Oh
no.
no.
It's almost worse, they're right above you.
Yeah, I mean, they're right above me. And that's all you hear in the darkness is that smushy sound.
Yep.
That's all.
And I can see spot.
And I was like, I don't know. I was like, what do I do? Do I like continue with what I'm doing because they clearly saw that I was awake and didn't care? Or do now I just like pretend to go to sleep and just like question my life's decisions?
Yeah, what do you do with that? Like, I have a beacon of light illuminating my face, like, you know that I am awake.
Yeah, so I didn't do anything. I think I probably just laid there and waited for it to finish. And then when it was done, I was like, okay, I'm going to sleep.
Guess I just go to bed now. Not sure what else to do.
Yeah. So if you're in that situation, first of all, you should probably not be engaging in sexual activity when other people are around, if they are non-consenting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Make sure you have consent from everybody involved.
Listen, I can clearly see that you are awake and we are about to engage in intercourse on the bed above you. Would you, A, like to stay, B, like to leave, or C, just go hang out in the bathroom for a few minutes? Take your pick.
And then if you find yourself in my situation, I don't have any suggestions on how to handle it with grace, but you should tell them to stop.
Or just make it really awkward. From the bottom bunk, be like, yeah, girl. Get a room. How awkward. Sex is just an awkward thing.
It is. But speak up if you need to. That's my from that
and
story.
We'll broach that a bit when we have an episode on consent later, which we as well. I'd say that counts.
I don't know if I have any other good stories about other sounds. Do you have anything that comes to mind?
I think the other sound that we should discuss is just the noises that people themselves make.
Oh yeah.
And I say this because I think you have more control to an extent over the sounds that are like coming out of your mouth, more so than you do, a queef or a fart or, the mac and cheese pot, what have you. But I think that some people get so self-conscious about how they sound during any sort of sexual activity that they either do their best to make sounds that they think the other person wants to hear, or they just don't make sounds at all. Or if they do just kind of ride the wave of passion and they end up sounding like a dinosaur, then they end up really embarrassed. And I think it's important to throw out there that at its core, sex it's a very almost animalistic thing. Like, especially I think the more passionate it is. And when you factor that in, like, nobody's going to sound perfect. And the people who you hear in like pornography, that classic like like that's not how most people sound. You can grunt, you can groan, you can, like, don't be so self-conscious about the noises that you're making. Just make the noises that you want to make and that feel good to you.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong way to sound.
Mm-mm.
When you're with your partner in mind, obviously. But that's conversation in and of itself, is you're talking between each other. But when it comes to just like moans and groans and whatever those are, there's no right or wrong. And honestly, if we're talking about like what we see in pornography, they're actors.
Yep.
They are actors. And I can guarantee you that each one of those sounds isn't necessarily from a genuine reaction from the feeling that they're feeling.
Oh, no, not at all.
Overplayed, totally.
And I'll say too, like, from a personal place, it is so much sexier to hear like a good natural reaction from your partner than to hear something that sounds staged and fake. Like, it gets me hotter to think like I'm actually causing that reaction versus like they're putting that reaction on for me.
And it's all with communication. I mean, that's all that is too, is communication. Like, that's just a kind of communication. And so it's nice to get the positive feedback from your partner.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Positive feedback. That's a good way to put it.
You know that they're also enjoying, what's happening.
Yeah.
And so to some degree, you can play that up or play it down a little bit. But it should never be forced, I guess. Like, you don't need to act. Like, if you're having a good time, just have a good time. If you're not having a good time, you don't
have a good time.
Yeah.
I think it's just as important to communicate that as it is that you are having a good time, Yeah. You don't want to give your partner the false impression. So I thought that was an important thing to just toss on there at the end. But
yeah, I think that's all good stuff. I think that there's so many sounds that bodies make, whether they're voluntary or involuntary. I mean, sometimes if you're having a rough day, you're even things like you were saying earlier, your stomach.
Oh yeah.
Like growling just in the middle, like, holy moly.
Yep. And that happens too.
Yeah.
Any sound that your body makes just normally out on the street, whenever, that can happen in the bedroom too. So just worry less about it and recognize that everybody does it. And what you really need to do is, if you're with a partner who's going to shame you for any sound that you've made in the heat of the moment, I would argue that you're probably not with the right partner.
I would agree.
So that's just my 2 cents. Mama Keith says, be with somebody who doesn't mind if you fart in bed.
It's memories. Those are memories.
And they will be precious ones too. So
definitely. Okay, well, is it that time of our podcast?
I think it is for our favorite part.
Yes, our favorite part. Okay, it's
Sex in the News.
Okay, and today I am delivering our Sex in the News article.
I can't wait.
This one, let's see. Want to make sure I get the title right, because that's so important to this.
So important. And for those of you who haven't joined in on any of our previous podcasts, Sex in the News, one of us at the end of every podcast will choose some headline, some news article from somewhere out there in the world that involves, relates to, alludes to sex ed, etc. And then we will bring that to the table to discuss in the podcast. The other one of us does not know what it's going to be about. So it's always a fun little surprise.
Raw reactions, true reactions, real-time reactions. Okay, are you ready for this one?
I'm ready.
This one is, let's see, okay, my title is, "This sex myth is disturbingly common, according to a new survey."
This sex myth is disturbingly common, according to a recent survey. Okay. I'm trying to think what sex myth could be disturbingly common.
Oh, there's so many sex myths.
There's so many, there's a million. That should be a whole episode unto itself.
Oh, it
Sex
should
myths.
be.
Noted. Tell me what sex myth this is.
Okay, so the sex myth in today's article is the prevalent belief that women are less likely to contract and carry sexually transmitted infections.
Really?
Yes.
That's a myth at all?
So what this survey was focusing on was female sexual relations.
Okay.
So women having sexual encounters with other women.
Okay.
And the prevalence of this myth means that women felt safer having sex with other women in regards to infections than they did with men. And so they were less likely to wear protection against sexually transmitted infections.
Interesting. I wonder where that stems from, because there could be, I could see it coming from a lot of different things. Like, and I think we've discussed this in the podcast before, I'm not sure, but there's the myth of like the dirty guy versus like the clean and proper girl. Or if it leads back to those earlier like homophobic, like gay men carry AIDS.
I'm sure there's some stemming from that. And it was a survey, and some of the participants, they got feedback and comments and things like that from them. And what they've kind of found was that, and it's not isolated to like this specific thing. I'm sure there's, it's multifactored, but they found that because sex education is so heavily skewed towards heterosexual relationships and activities, that nobody really addresses how to properly prevent against STIs when a woman is having sexual activity with another woman.
That's fascinating.
And when class, because you're typically younger when you're having these classes, that even if you ask and say like, hey, how does this work?
Right.
The information you're getting back is heterosexual information.
That is a whole episode unto itself too.
Oh, absolutely. So it is a myth. Women and men, I actually did a little side research looking into it. So this comes from the CDC, and it actually appears to vary between the infection itself. So women, from this information that I gathered, were more likely to have chlamydia, but men were more likely to have gonorrhea.
Okay.
But the numbers kind of balance themselves out. So you're not more or less likely to get, an infection from one gender versus the other gender. And there are different risk levels based on like, community and orientation and a bunch of other stuff. It's not just simple as black and white, but it's a myth that women are cleaner, less likely, and that is cleaner in quotes for anybody listening and not watching.
Well, I think too, it says a lot about the sexual education that people are getting, that a myth like that is so prevalent in the first place.
Oh yeah, totally. So ladies, keep yourself safe and make sure you're using protection, because you can catch STIs from a female partner and your male partner. Yes,
you absolutely can. You can catch STIs from a doorknob. Let's be honest. Just they're out there. I think maybe we need to have a few episodes in the future where we have like sex ed, RE, heterosexual relationships, sex ed, RE, homosexual relationships, and kind of split that up in a way that addresses things like this so that myths like that aren't quite as prevalent as they are currently.
I think that's great. I think we definitely should. There's a lot of space for that.
We got a lot to do. We got a big agenda.
Which means you have to keep watching because you need to stay on top. You need to know the things.
So yes, you should definitely keep watching. We've got a lot to do, a lot to talk about. If you thought we were funny, if you found us interesting, if you like sex, if you hate sex, if you're a teacher, if you're a student, if you're a sexpert or want to be a sexpert, if you think we sound sexy, if you think that we're cute, or if you're just bored and you need a little bit of entertainment, hit that like button and subscribe. If you have a question that you would like for us to answer or a topic you'd like for us to address or discuss, or maybe something that you're just nervous to ask yourself, please send us an email. We definitely want to hear from you. We will definitely link everything down below, but the email is notyourmotherssexedpod.
Not your mother's sex ed pod at gmail.com.
Not your mother's sex ed pod at gmail.com. We also have a YouTube channel where you can watch this podcast as opposed to just listening to it. Highly encourage. We're just real cute to look at. And we also have a Facebook page that we will link down below. So please reach out. Thank you so much for listening today. Go out there, make good, informed choices. Be safe. Have a great day.
Yes, stay safe. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Toodles.
Toodles.
That felt good.
Nailed it.